afternoon and welcome to Mediascope, the programme for and about the public relations, event management and journalism industries. I'm Ellen Gunning and you're very welcome to the programme, which is sponsored by the Irish Academy of Public Relations. On this week's show, I'm chatting with Professor Ed Lourdan, PR Professor at Westchester University in Pennsylvania. Thanks for taking my call, Ed.
Ellen, thank you for having me.
Not at all. I'm fascinated by President Trump and his relationship with the media and his press office's relationship with the media. And I thought no better man than yourself to give us an insider's view. Can I begin by asking you about President Trump first? Okay, his relationship with the media. He's called them the enemy of the people. He excludes them, or he tries to exclude them by tweeting, by bypassing them. Has he had a bad history with media in the past as a business person? Where does this actually come from?
Actually, I think you have to think about which set of rules we're talking about, or which metrics we're trying to figure out on whether it's working or not. As he says, I became president of the United States, so I can't be doing everything wrong. But along the way, he seems to be losing some credibility. If he's working with the New York tabloids and talking about his sex life, then it's one thing. Then all press is good press. But when you're the president of the United States and credibility is at stake and it starts to erode, then I would say he's not being successful.
But do you reckon he's always had a very fractious relationship with media?
He has a complex one, and he has not played by the rules in that regard as well. We understand from our the work that you do in Dublin and the work that the PRSA does in the States, there's some fundamental rules about it in terms of representation and stating the facts and things like that, and he breaks those rules pretty regularly, and after a while that's going to start to hurt you.
And from a business point of view, has he been called out on it in the past? So did he come into what I'm trying to figure is he seems to have very deliberately from this side of the pond decided that he really doesn't want to engage with media, traditional media, or he wants to engage with them as little as is humanly possible. But I would have thought, again, from our perspective, he didn't seem to have a particularly bad relationship with the media. He seemed to be a media persona, which helped him in terms of his Dragon's Den appeal, his television appeal. So I'm trying to figure out why he worries so much about the media, why he dislikes them so much, why he tries to exclude them so much.
He's changed over time in that. One thing that hasn't changed, is pretty constant, is that he cares very, very deeply about it. So much so that at times he's actually contacted the media under different guises and acted as his own press person, and he's pretty obsessed with it. So it's one of his ways of measuring his success beyond money. But along the way, he's blurred and broken a lot of the rules in terms of the way we would think about it from a professional perspective.
If we look at his tweeting, he's been pretty successful at it. He's got a huge amount of followers. He does manage to get his message uninterrupted, unspun by anybody, directly out to his followers. And as you say, he was elected president, so he definitely appealed to somebody and got his message across. Was Twitter the making of him as a president? Was that really what won him the election in terms of media?
Oh, and that's a good one to look at. I know in your academy you look at the evolving technologies and the significance of that. And in some ways, Twitter has emerged for him and for others as a fantastic method of communication in that he does get to bypass the media. So he gets to go directly to audiences who care about him in an unfiltered way. It's sort of the modern equivalent of the fireside chats of FDR back in the 1940s, where he's actually being able to state exactly what he wants and getting exactly what he wants. That's the plus side. On the minus side, as you know in studying public relations, on the minus side, there are some huge disadvantages to Twitter in terms of moving away from strategy and moving into a sort of a reactive mode, and also not taking the time to consider the bank shot or consider the ramifications of what you're doing. So we like to strategize in public relations, not simply put out information. We like to strategize, and when you do that, when you simply put out information and don't think about the repercussions of it, you're going to end up with some of the situations he's ended up with.
And do you think it's that he has PR advisors around him that he simply doesn't pay attention to? Does he have PR advisors who say there's nothing wrong with it, go ahead and don't see the danger? Or has he just decided this is what he does and how he does it, and everybody can pick up, whatever happens in his wake?
I think he could use your Academy's classes to talk about what the good and bad of these things are. I think he definitely has advisors, and I think some of them have to come close to quitting by simply saying, you've got to put this thing down. There's an argument that he's crazy like a fox, in that when he needs to create a distraction, when something is going wrong for him, which happens frequently, then he sends out a tweet and then sends the press and the public in another direction.
Which can actually be quite a clever PR strategy as well.
Certainly can be. And if you're trying to move the story, if you're trying to get onto something else, he can do that. He can do that simply by making an innocuous tweet, something that's fairly simple and kind of goofy, and then everybody talks about it, or something serious like the Obama wiretapping charge. But it does move the show. It does cause things to change. However, he's then stuck with whatever he tweeted. And then that becomes a story that rolls for a couple of days, and in some cases it's become quite serious, as in the case of the Obama wiretapping one, which is sort of, some people have argued it's a libelous situation, and some people have said, what's the President of the United States doing accusing a former president of what could be a felony?
And you've actually had the FBI involved in investigating it as well to see, is there any truth in it?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird moment. He's had two stories so far that have led to investigate, not just the FBI coming out and saying that these aren't true, but we have him then turning around and saying, in the case of the wiretap and in the case of the illegal people voting, he said, well, I'm going to form a commission on this, and then we're going to study it, because he doesn't back down from the original tweet. So one of the stories that's floating around now is, my gosh, these commissions involve a lot of lawyers. They take months. They're going to cost hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, probably millions of dollars, and they're all based on an incorrect tweet. And that's he just keeps doubling down. He just never backs down after he says one of these things, even to the point of saying, we'll form a commission about it. And what's a commission going to say? That there were 3 million undocumented voters? That doesn't make any sense.
It's a very interesting one, because, as you say, he moves from the tweets which are very serious, like the wiretapping or the illegal voting, to tweets which are positively childish, like the Meryl Streep tweet when she did the Golden Globes, and he tweeted that, I don't know, he disapproved of what she said, but that anyway she wasn't that good an actress anyway. And you look at it from, from a distance maybe, and you think, it's the kind of thing a 3-year-old would do. It's not something that you expect actually of an office holder, of an office of that level of importance, that it would actually bother him so much. It comes back to what you said earlier about, he really cares very deeply about how the public perceive him, because something like Meryl Streep's approach to the Golden Globes should probably, with good PR advice, have amounted to no comment at all. Just let it slide past. She said what she said. It was a Golden Globes award. Move on. Why does he care so deeply about how we perceive him?
He's massively thin-skinned and massively impulsive, and he's sort of those things. Those things come off on Twitter as if they're on steroids, and I think it's something that your listeners should care about in terms of thinking strategically. If you took any of us, me, you, your listeners, if you took any of us at our worst moments and then broadcast them to everybody, we would say, we really need to step back from this. We really need to avoid this channel, this method for doing this. But he's obsessive with it. He does a lot of these. Everybody watches for the timing of them. He does them at like 6 o'clock in the morning, so it's clear everybody's saying he's walking around in his bathrobe and getting up and tweeting away, and there's this inconsistency in terms of the significance of it. So this Twitter thing sort of magnifies his flaws. If the Twitter company is listening to your show, I'm not beating up Twitter as a technology. It's a wonderful technology.
No, I don't think we're saying it's Twitter's fault. We're saying that it's a technology that he uses, but he uses it very effectively. He really has this channel of it, and by the way, that's the output. We also have to consider the input, because he makes a lot of his decisions based on wrong information, and he may be getting some of that through his Twitter feed, through who he's following and what he's listening to. So he's using it in ways that work. You'd have to think he was really clever to think that this was all a grand strategy. It's much more believable to think that he's just a compulsive, very thin-skinned person, and
lashes out at anyone who in any way crosses him.
He's a fascinating character no matter which way you look at him. His staff choices have also been quite extraordinary. I mean, Sean Spicer and Kellyanne Conway are the two that spring to mind, I suppose, most immediately and that people talk about most. But Steve Bannon is a very interesting character. Tell me a little bit about him, if you would, and his involvement.
Well, he comes from the Breitbart organization, which is one of these evolving media that take the position that swaying people in our direction is more important than telling the truth. So we have, as you know, we have this evolving set of media that are sort of part media, part political hobby for somebody. And it's weird that they end up in a position of power. He's moved from a person who might have been a counselor of some kind on the media side to a policymaker. In fact, he has security clearances that are going to put him into the highest levels of the defense meetings, which scares the bejesus out of people. It seems like a mismatch in terms of what the person's skill set is versus what kind of position they hold in the organization.
But it also says a lot about what President Trump sees as his role going forward.
Oh, it absolutely does. A number of these people. Trump apparently prizes loyalty over all, and he doesn't even really think about the ramifications of giving his daughter security clearances and things like that. It's a freewheeling sort of Wild West situation we have, and everyone's trying to catch up to it and understand the new rules.
I suppose talking about journalists and whether, people who are sort of part media, part hobbyists, we also had that situation with the White House reporters where Sean Spicer more or less decided which reporters would be genuine, I'm using that in inverted commas, and which were not, who would be allowed to attend briefings, who would not, which on one hand seems to be a very logical thing that a White House press officer would do. But when you look at the people that he's allowing or disallowing, it raises all sorts of issues. I mean, two things really here, Ed. One is the reaction of the media to the White House media themselves to this level of control and the fact that they allowed somebody else to decide who would be left outside the room. Talk to me about that first, maybe, if you would. Did they call it the right way? Should they have all walked out and discussed? Has there been any resolution in the meantime? What's your take on it?
I think that's a good question. They're really trying to upset the paradigm at a fundamental level here. If we think about the very first day, and the ancient balance, the old balance in terms of this dance that goes on between the press and the public relations folks, and they both need each other. But certainly, the organization, whatever it is, needs the press. They need to court the press. They're going to get their bad stories and things like that, but they need to court the press. It appears that the new administration and their press people are taking the position we're going to be as antagonistic as possible. So from the very first day with the first story, the very first press conference was astoundingly antagonistic. And this is the one where they're saying that this is on the election day. I'm sorry, on the inauguration day, that the crowds were larger than the Obama crowds.
Yes, yeah.
It was demonstrably false. It was demonstrably false what they were doing. So I'm not going to be Snow White about this and say that public relations people never shade the truth or anything like that. But as a professional and as an academic, that there's a difference between shading the truth and flat out lying. They're two different things. And a lot of what's going on in this administration is they don't just lie frequently; they lie demonstrably. As in, if you and I disagree over whether it's a sunny, how pleasant a day it is. That's one kind of disagreement. I say it's a nice day. You say, well, it's a little bit cloudy. So that's within bounds for both of us. But if you're saying 2 and 2 equals 5, then it's demonstrably false immediately. It's just, and they're saying things that are demonstrably false immediately. So the press is sort of dealing with the situation where they have to report a story. They report a quote or report something released by the government, by the White House. And then they have to say, should we immediately say that this is a lie? This is, in fact, even what you call it. Is it a falsehood? Is it a misinterpretation? They've become more and more aggressive and started to just call it a lie. They call it a lie. So we find this going on, back to your original question regarding who's in the press office. I think this is an evolving question, and this is not just Trump dealing with this. This is going on in France, and this is going on in Germany. I imagine there's some form of this going on in Dublin as well, but we do have an emerging concept of what it means to be press. So that's open to interpretation? Do we let the bloggers in? Do we let the people who have their own websites in?
I love the idea that 2 + 2 = 5, and we should accept that as an alternative factor, an alternative truth. Let me just take a quick break, and we'll be back to you right after this.